Hello, and welcome to the Cultivating Confidence podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Grams. I am a life coach who specializes in anxiety, health, and human design. And I also happen to be a functional medicine pharmacist. This podcast is a compilation of conversations that I've had with clients and colleagues. So listen in as we explore the mind, body, and soul's confidence in its many forms. So what is guilt anyway, right? It's an emotion. And as with all other emotions, emotions are just specific vibrations that we feel in our body. And I was talking to someone recently about what guilt feels like because she was feeling it. And she's like, it feels like something on my back right now. It's this tingly sort of irritation on my back, right? I personally tend to notice it in my chest or in my solar plexus area. It's just this heavy kind of murky, dark, icky feeling. It doesn't feel good, right? But it's just vibrations in our body. And Brene Brown says that guilt is holding something we've done or failed to do up against our values and feeling psychological discomfort. And that psychological discomfort translates into our body as physical discomfort, right? So basically, what she's saying is when we do something that goes against our morals, when we think something is morally wrong, we feel something psychologically, or in my opinion, physically as well, right? Because most of the time when I sit with people, when I sit with clients and ask them to describe what they're feeling, they close their eyes and they can tell me exactly where in their body they're feeling it, right? And that's what we have to do in order to process it first, is to notice that it's there. Where is it? What does it look like? Describe it. Make a character out of it, right? But here's a couple of examples to consider that, it's a moral thing, not necessarily a legal thing that we think of, or, that sort of thing. Because like consider jaywalking, and jaywalking is something that a lot of people do. Nobody feels guilty about it, even though it's technically illegal some places. It's not really against anyone's values, right? But what about when you even just think about not wanting to go visit family in the holidays, right? Or for some birthday party or something, right? Guilt comes in because morally we think that we should want to go see them. Or what about guilty pleasures? Like they could be TV shows, but we enjoy them, but we shouldn't because, they're too dramatic and we don't want to feed into the drama. Or, there's something taboo about them and you just like to watch, what these families are doing. Oh my gosh, right? It's this guilty pleasure that we have. We call it a guilty pleasure for a reason, right? Because we feel guilty watching it. But if nobody else finds out about it, then it's fine, right? But guilt is something that many people feel over things we do as well, right? So giving into cravings, not going to the gym when you promised yourself you would, not performing well enough at work, performing too well where you're outshining other people on the team, spending too much time in one place instead of the other place, or, we can come up with a reason to feel guilty about just about anything. And guilt is one of the things that we are evolutionarily conditioned to experience when we're doing something that goes outside of what the tribe says is okay. We want to keep the tribe feeling peaceful and cohesive. And in theory, guilt, when we do something or don't do something, will help us make different decisions in the future that align with the group's values, right? So we avoid feeling the guilt because guilt feels shitty. And we don't want to feel it. So we'll do anything to make sure that the tribe is happy, even if it means we are not, right? We've been socialized and conditioned to believe that this common interest is about everyone except ourselves, right? As long as everyone else is happy, we're good. But especially if you're a woman, men don't experience this to the extent that women do. Not that they don't experience it, but that's kind of a clue as to like how we know it has been socialized into us. It's just caused by a thought and not actually by a real issue, right? It's just collective thinking or thinking within ourselves. But consider this, that your thoughts do not have moral value. And it's a quote from one of my favorite coaches. It's impossible to do thought work and work through things when you're judging the shit out of yourself for what you're thinking. So if you're feeling guilty about not wanting to go visit your family, for example, if you're feeling guilty about, whatever it is, the thought is not a moral judgment against yourself. It's just information that you can use, right? Just lean into the idea that the thought that you're having is just a sentence in your brain. Consider it, right? Because what's the alternative? If we believe that it's got moral value, it doesn't change the fact that we're not actually doing anything. We're just thinking a thought, right? So how does that change? How does that shift what's going on, right? But we've kind of taken it a step even farther than guilt most of the time, or 10, a step or 10 out of the way. And we take it too far, and it's pervasive, and it becomes like a personality trait for us. And a lot of people feel this like constant threat of guilt, and we take it to shame. We feel shame about not wanting to visit family. And I'm just going to keep using that as an example. There's 1,000 other examples, but for some reason, that was something that just came up as something, I don't know, whatever. I kept thinking it, so I kept putting it in my notes, right? But the shame part of it, here's another. I've been listening to Brene Brown a lot lately, and I just end up like having these moments of deep, like just all the feels, and I'm like crying at my desk. It's ridiculous, but it's also like amazing because I'm like, she is so incredible. But she talks about the difference between guilt and shame. And the guilt is the thought of having done something wrong. And shame is believing we are wrong. We are flawed and therefore unworthy of inclusion or something to that effect. And I don't believe that shame in any way, shape, or form is helpful or productive. And I think it's much more likely to be the source of destructive, hurtful behavior, more so than the solution or cure. Where guilt sometimes can be a prompt to change our behavior. Shame is more like, oh, I have to hide from everybody. And this can never see the light of day, right? Like we do that, and it's just destructive, because we don't take action to improve ourselves when it gets to the shame part. And shame is one of the lowest vibration energy feelings that we can feel. I think it's the lowest, actually, where like joy and love and all that stuff is way up here. Shame is the exact opposite of it. And we don't want to feel it. So we avoid feeling it. We turn it into anger. We turn it into frustration. We turn it into guilt instead. Well, sometimes it goes both ways. But yeah, it's not productive. So guilt is saying, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And shame is saying, I'm sorry, I am a mistake. So just think about that and notice when you're feeling guilty, is it shame seeping in, or that you're just saying, oh, I feel so guilty, right? And let's talk about perfectionism for a second. Perfectionism is that dancing partner with guilt, right? We set perfectionistic, unrealistic expectations for ourselves, and then we place a moral value on it. I should work out 5 days a week and never eat fast food and never talk badly to my kids and never do all that. Like, those are all the rules that we have that we must follow. Otherwise, we're going to feel shame and guilt. Right. But we make it a morality issue, and then we don't comply with those expectations. And then we feel guilt and shame over thoughts that we literally made up that we think we should be doing. Right. It stems from our unconscious thoughts, because most people are not going to say that it's a moral issue to not work out 5 days a week, right? Like, it's not morally wrong to not work out a bunch. But if you have set that as your goal and you're questioned about, oh, do you feel guilty when you don't work out? Yeah, all the time. I feel guilty when I'm in the fast food line. I feel guilty when I yell at somebody or my kids, right? And subconsciously, that's how we know it feels like a moral issue, because you have the feels of it, but you might not necessarily have the thought that it is a moral wrong that you're committing, right? But what about working too much, right? Technology has made it possible to work from anywhere at any time of the day. And then when we don't actually work from anywhere all the times of the day, we feel guilty. We've been conditioned to believe that we're lazy if we don't stay up and work overtime, or, work on the weekends or, are constantly, I mean, especially in the world of an entrepreneur, it's like, oh, I have all these things and all these ideas and I have to act on all of them. And if I'm not working 85 hours a week, then I'm failing, right? Like, and that's just not true. We just make these thoughts up and we believe them. And then we feel terrible about them. It doesn't make any sense, at least in my opinion. But so setting the unrealistic standards for ourselves and then not meeting them is one source of guilt. But the other one comes from obligations to family and friends. And here's where this example of going to visit people has, permeated my whole talk today. I don't even know that there's anyone that I don't want to go see right now. So I'm not sure why it became such a big topic today, but hopefully it resonates with you guys. Anyway, the obligation from our family and friends and other social interactions, we spend a lot of energy worrying about and thinking about what other people think about us. When we do something that we think they'll think poorly of, we feel guilty. Like if we think that they might think a certain way, we change ourselves to manipulate them into thinking better things about us. Like just think about that for a second. Like if you have a friend or family member who wants you to go visit, but you don't want to go visit, you have one person who votes yes to the visit and one person who votes no. But when you're the one voting no and the one like going to do the visiting, you worry about what the other person will make it mean if you say no. So we give their vote, their yes vote, more weight than our no vote, right? And then we just feel shitty and do it out of some moral obligation to make sure that the other person doesn't feel the way that we feel. Yeah, exactly. We are people pleasers to the 10th degree, probably more than that, right? But we opt out of feeling guilt and instead we stay silent and feel resentful for potentially like the whole visit instead of speaking our truth and being honest with the other person. And I'm not saying that that's, true 100% of the time, because sometimes it's just a little like nudge. And once you get there, everything's fine. And I'm absolutely a fan of like doing thought work to make sure that you are having a good time no matter what. Like let go of the guilt and resentment if you decide to do something that you didn't actually want to do. But like that's where the default is for a lot of people that don't do thought work and don't know about this, because they just stay silent and they're like, oh, so and so told me I had to come and now I feel like I have to. Like we just stay and bitch in our heads, basically. We feel guilty when we don't want to go, and we feel guilty, and that causes us to take action that we don't actually want to do, right? We tell ourselves that we have to act a certain way to maintain the relationship, and it's not necessarily true. It doesn't make any sense, right? So when you act in a way that isn't the truth for you, and even if it's just telling the person, hey, I'm not really feeling it, but I'm going to come as a gift for you, right? We take the choice out of it and we act like we have to do it. But when you act in a way that isn't the truth for you, you're actually creating disconnection in the relationship. You're undermining the purpose of why you think you need to go visit them in the first place, and you're letting your guilt or the threat of guilt change who you are being. And just notice that being willing to feel the guilt and standing up for yourself might actually make you more willing to do it in the first place, because you just took the resistance of the guilt out of the way. Right? Like if I might not feel guilty, maybe I'll do it anyway. Right? And just leave that part out of it. We don't have to feel the icky. Because, it's kind of like when you're willing to feel guilt and you make that equal to not feeling the guilt in the first place, there's a lot more freedom there, right? Make it an optional thing. Well, let's look at setting healthy boundaries. So you decide on a boundary ahead of time. You will yourself to stand firm this time, because last time it didn't work. A thousand times before it didn't work, right? But then you start to think about what the other person is thinking and how your relationship with them might be affected, what they might think. They're going to resist, they're going to push back. And then you start to feel guilty. You question yourself and you question your decisions and you question the boundaries. And then they start to crumble before they've even started. before you've even said them out loud, right? Instead of being open and honest and vulnerable with the other person, you stay silent and you stay small and you let your own boundaries be ignored by you. And you take the brunt of the bad feeling in order to manipulate the other person into feeling happy, right? You reject yourself and what you want so that the other person doesn't reject you. You disconnect from yourself and from them by not telling them the truth in order to stay in where your brain tells you is safe. Have you ever considered it like that? So what happens when we do something anyway and we're not willing to feel the guilt? It gets suppressed. It gets buried in our subconscious and in our body, and it accumulates more and more and more over time. And when it accumulates, you get closer and closer to intensely feeling that feeling with smaller and smaller triggers, right? We want to empty out the guilt tank, but when we pretend it's not there, it just fills up without us paying attention to it and consciously emptying it. And then it only takes a little piece of something to trigger like such an intense feeling because you've got it all there. Like it might be something small. It might be like not baking for a bake sale. And then all of a sudden you're just overwhelmed with guilt. You're sitting at home. You can't move because you feel so shitty about yourself. Then you've definitely slipped into shame, right? Does that help anything that you want to do in your life? No. No one wants to feel guilt. Like I for sure don't ever want to feel guilt, but we do it sometimes as a weapon. We do it unconsciously. I mean, if a friend wants us to do something and we're just not feeling it, instead of saying, no, I just want to be alone tonight. Like I just need some alone time. We have this like obligation to say yes to them. Right. And then the friend might say something like, oh no, you're forcing me to go out all by myself. You're abandoning me. Like don't abandon me. Like it's such a dramatic thing that like sometimes it's a playful thing and whatever, but there are friends who are like, no, I don't want to do this alone. Like you can choose to just not if you don't want to. Nobody's forcing you to go. Right. But what do you do when you feel the guilt? Like first you acknowledge it. I'm feeling guilty right now. And that sometimes takes a lot of the resistance away because you're willing to look at it. You're willing to take the flashlight into the basement and take a look and see how bad the mold is. Notice what it feels like, what it looks like, what sensations you feel, right? Invite it to stay for as long as it needs to. And you'd be surprised at how quickly it can pass. If you did something, decide whether it's something that you actually did wrong to another person and then apologize, right? Genuinely. But you get to decide that no matter how that person reacts, you will release the guilt after owning what you did, right? You just get to watch to make sure that it is something that you actually did do wrong, because so many of us apologize for things that we didn't actually do wrong. So stop that. Stop apologizing for thinking things, right? You deserve to take up space. You deserve to feel good. You deserve to follow your dreams. And if it's just setting a healthy boundary that starts to trigger the guilt, again, just notice what your thoughts are underneath and notice if shame is creeping in. Like, I'm not being a good parent or a good friend or a good spouse. Like, just question that thought. Those are just sentences that your brain is presenting you. And would you want the other person to be dishonest with you like you would be for them, right? You would let them begrudgingly follow through on something while you stayed happy and they suffer silently, right? Is that the kind of friend you want to be? Are those the kind of friends you want to have that make you do that knowingly, right? Why do we think that we should feel crappy if we don't think that the other people should? Like, do you want your people to be authentic and honest with you, even if it hurts your feelings from time to time? Like, I love having friends who are just going to tell me the truth, because then I never have to question their motives. I never have to question their loyalty. Never have to question anything about them, because they're willing to tell me their truth. Like, no, I don't want to go out tonight. All right. Hope you have a great night in. I'm still going to go, or not. Right. Like, maybe I was looking forward to going out with them. And if they don't want to, maybe now's not the right time. I don't make it mean anything about me or my friendship with them. It's just like, they want to do this. I want them to genuinely want to do it. Yes or no? You get to make the choice, right? But what you need to do is be radically honest with yourself. There are very few things that people can make you do. You just decide, I have to, because of thoughts that you have, and not because someone is physically forcing you to do the thing, right? There may be consequences, but it's not like, mostly it's really just not wanting to feel a certain way, or not wanting somebody else to feel a certain way. But just be honest with yourself, because you are choosing to do the thing so that you don't have to feel the guilt sometimes. And that's okay. It's not helpful to think that you have to do it from a place of guilt. It's not helpful at all. It's not useful. It's not a useful thought to have. It might be better for you if you know that you are choosing your actions. You're taking responsibility for your feelings and your actions, and then you can take the action as a courtesy and like a gift for the other person. Like, I don't want to go visit family, but I'm going to do it so I don't feel guilty. And I'm going to let that not be their fault. I'm going to leave the guilt behind, and I'm going to show up as a gift for whoever it is. Maybe it's mom, right? You get to choose everything that you do, whether it's feeding your kids dinner or putting them to bed. Lots of parents don't put their kids to get to bed. Why can't I say bed right now? You get to decide whether you show up for work on Monday. Lots of people don't. I worked in a place where it was a revolving door of so-and-so didn't show up today. It was their third shift, right? Lots of people decide that that's not a good enough reason. But if you're showing up, just know that you're choosing it, right? Maybe you like having a job. Maybe you like your job. Maybe you like having an income, right? And you want to keep that. So then you're going to keep going, but it's your choice to do that. You just have to like your reasons. And if your reason is because I don't want to feel guilty, that's 1,000% okay. You get to choose that. But if you don't like your reasons, we need to talk one-on-one and have a real conversation about what the issues are, right? But yeah, let guilt exist in your body, and consider this, like, what if allowing the guilt to exist in your body is exactly the thing that you need to feel in order to be able to set boundaries that help you feel amazing more of the time? If you're not worried about feeling guilty stopping you from setting boundaries that you know are healthy for you, like, where would you be in life right now? There was something that Brene Brown was talking about compassion, and how the most compassionate people have boundaries of steel. They know exactly what they're willing to take from other people. They know exactly what they're willing to do, and they politely decline everything else. And this is like studies of thousands of people that she interviewed. The people that were the most compassionate wouldn't do things that they didn't want to do, right? All right. So that's all I have for notes. I'm going to shut the recording off. And like I said, you guys can catch this on replay, and I'm going to open it up for questions, commentary. We can dive in further, whatever feels good. So thank you for taking the time to listen in today. Many of you will be able to take the ideas that you've heard and apply them in your daily life, and that's really all you need. That's amazing. But for those of you who could use a little one-on-one help with how to make these things actually work for you in your real life, please reach out. The link to schedule a consult with me is in the show notes. You don't have to do this alone. See you soon.